One of the unique aspects of the Ukraine war, and indeed the Maidan revolution that preceded Russia's invasion of Crimea, is that Ukrainians came together to fight for freedom. A wide range of people from across the political spectrum, and many who were completely new to politics. Although they may have held widely different views on how society should be organized, they nonetheless coalesced around higher values like freedom, justice, and transparency, and fought together to defend them, and are still fighting now, 9 years on. Bogdan serves with the Armed Forces of Ukraine. And today, in the conversation with Bogdan, I'm going to be joined by a collaborator on the channel, Dean, who's going to help out to keep the conversation flowing and really try to understand not only what is going on in the front lines, but how Ukraine can achieve victory, what it needs to achieve victory, and to get a better understanding of how the whole range of Ukrainian society is coming together to try and liberate its territory. Bogdan, welcome.
Welcome. Hello.
Well, let's start with the state of the war, because we hear various things, and having been in Ukraine last week, I heard a number of positive things and a number of worrying things. One of the worrying things is the difficulty, really, of making progress in the offensive that is rolling out at the moment, and the fact that Russia has been allowed to build its defenses up, and that it's proving to be quite costly and difficult to degrade Russia's defensives. So, what's your view on the counteroffensive, and how's it going?
It's going in the normal way. We have a lot of problems, but it's every war have a lot of problems and new situations or something what you can change. For example, in this way, we have two mines. Our Earth is two mines, a lot of mines. It's a big problem for our infantry and for our technique.
And I see various clips of innovative solutions to the demining problem, but you're dealing with something on a vast scale, aren't you? The length of the front line is actually longer than the Eastern Front in the Second World War. So this is a huge problem to deal with. It's a huge challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it's a big squares which are mined. It's a big problem. A lot of trenches, a lot of preparing positions of Russians. It's big war. You need to understand. It's a very big war.
And that really, one of the other concerns, of course, is the slow supply of some weaponry, but also the promises that have been made by many Western countries. Either the equipment is not being delivered in terms of the sort of complete packages that are promised. It's slow. I've also seen reports that some equipment comes and it needs quite a lot of repairs and attention before it can actually be used on the front line. In your view, what do we need to be doing to help Ukraine actually win rather than just survive?
Of course, we are glad and we are always thanks for all the help from the Western countries. What we need, of course, we need planes because we have not enough of them. We need more weapons. We need more mines and a lot of this. We need a lot of weapons. Soldiers we have, but we need a lot of weapons because in big war, weapons are always finished. Ammo is finished. No, we, of course, people are also finished. Will be finished.
Well, we'll come to the topic of training as well, because training is another interesting area which you've got a unique perspective on. But one of the other worrying things I hear is that in the first part of the war, we know that Russia lost a lot of equipment, and they lost a lot of sort of heavy vehicles, especially in the Kharkiv offensive to Ukraine, who managed to gain some of that equipment. But we've seen endless videos of Russian soldiers with very, very poor equipment, terrible, ill-fitting uniforms, dreadful helmets, and old rusty rifles. But that shouldn't make us complacent, because the news I hear from multiple sources is that the Chinese are now supplying the Russians with equipment in huge quantities, and things like night scopes, drones, and potentially uniforms and other things. Do you think it's an issue that Russia is still being supplied or getting supplies in greater quantities than it was maybe a year ago?
In such way, yes, because as you say, for example, China is getting some supplies for the Russia, but Russia also has big supplies of their own weapons and ammo. Maybe not, for example, a uniform, but some AK, for example. We also use their weapons because their weapons is similar with Soviet system weapons. It's similar. It's a lot of ammo and nothing problem to use it. For example, Western to prepare to use Western weapons, we need some time to learn how to use it properly, and how to make it work.
And does that require Western training and support? Or for experienced battalions like the one you're part of, are you able to sort of, figure that out and sort of train yourselves using senior and experienced officers? Or does it really vary across the Ukrainian army? Does some benefit from Western training and others perhaps don't need so much?
You need to understand that, for example, Ukraine have new experience of this war. No other country have this experience. The experience of the modern, new, and new way of making a war. In my opinion, it will be better to learn Ukrainian soldier in Ukraine. It will be much cheaper, and it will be with using some knowledge which we know, and will be much better, and not waste much time for the soldier.
And is there a big difference between, people like yourselves and some of your comrades who have been fighting actually for many years, not just since February last year, but going all the way back to the invasion of Crimea and Donbas? Is there a difference between the sort of level of skill and training requirements of those much more experienced soldiers and the huge numbers of people who've been drafted in from civilian life over the last year, software engineers, goodness, hairdressers, gardeners, teachers, etc.?
And for example, I have experience of the ATO and OOS. I was in the military from the 14 to 16, and I also joined army with the new invasion of Russia. Of course, it's a we can say war, but it's one war. It's two different situation. In 14 or 16, we can see the Russians using a lot of people from the separatist organization or troops, and give them a lot of weapons which locals can use because there was not military. There was like just some terrorists, some private military companies, something like this. But in this big invasion, Russia is using their forces on the full. They're using all military machines what they have. It's a big difference, but the experience of the before the invasion, it's also a big part of our knowledge because we compare this and we know what will be in future.
And from some of the people I've spoken to about 2014, it seems that the state of the Ukrainian army in 2014 was relatively unprepared for, Russia's offensive operations at that time, but also perhaps politically unprepared to resist that. It seems there's been a huge transformation and a lot of work done to build out the Ukrainian army, its expertise, its sort of strategic and sort of tactical capabilities. What has been your impression of what's been going on over the last 9 years? Because if Russia had mounted a full-scale invasion in 2014, it's highly likely that they may have overrun the whole country. But now, they weren't able to, and it's very unlikely they'll be able to this year or next year actually take any new significant territories.
Yes, I agree. Our Ukrainian army wasn't prepared for the war in 2014. It was politically unprepared, military unprepared, society wasn't prepared for this war. But we learned quick, and we have big changes. Our army have much I don't know, biggest progress in maybe in Ukrainian history. And now we have pretty normal army with old equipment, new equipment. With all equipment, we are using it properly, training our soldier. It's getting better and better. But Russia don't have such big options because they lose too much in Ukraine, too much lose their Russian soldiers and techniques, and they the main their problem that they are not preparing, they were not preparing like in ideological way. We are fighting for our freedom. They fight for what? For some land in some other country? No, it's not serious.
And that's an interesting point you make there, because both in the war, but also going back to Maidan as well, where you had to resist potentially a slide back into authoritarianism, like we've seen in Russia, like we've seen in Belarus, the resurgence of a Soviet-style repressive regime. In both Maidan and the current war, you have people from every political background, all the way through from sort of left wing through to right wing. You have people who of multiple religions, ethnicities, backgrounds, cultures. And we see in, the US and the UK especially, a lot of divisions. It's as if people aren't part of the same country because they, what divides them overcomes anything that they might have in common. That doesn't seem to be the case in Ukraine. People with very, very different visions of how society should be run, nonetheless, are uniting around simple ideas like freedom, like having independent judiciary, justice system that is fair, reducing corruption, and so on. Would you agree with that? And then I'll turn the question to you and ask, what are you fighting for? What future Ukraine are you fighting for?
Yes, I agree. Our society and we have joined in one mission to survive and defeat Russia because we don't have other options. I agree that we have different nation, different I don't know, people from the business, from the school, all united in one big team to defeat Russia.
When peace comes, and I think Dean and myself are, like some others, absolutely convinced that that eventually Ukraine will be victorious in terms of its maximalist aims, which is to take back Donbas and Crimea, then of course comes the stage where people are going to have to come together in peacetime and agree and fight for a better politics. What's your vision of a peacetime Ukraine and the kind of values that you want to see prevail? Because, of course, in the past, corruption's been an issue, oligarchy has been an issue, and many other things as well. So what do you think are values which should unite people in peacetime as well?
First of all, Ukrainian, like in society way, it's already complete, like in democratic way. Our society is getting together to fix some problems. For example, Maidan or war or some volunteers problem. We are always getting together. After the war, after they will take all our territories, Crimea also. It will be time to rebuild Ukraine, rebuild our political society, to rebuild our society, to heal all the veterans and build new big country because we don't have other options. All the territories which was taken. We need a lot of time to back them, like in society, like in moral, by financial, by the language, by all these points. It will be big time for Ukraine, and we also must be preparing for some maybe new war because Russia, if we won't defeat Russia and don't kill all the Russian state, Russia will attack us once again in third time.
And do you think being part of NATO and the EU could provide some protections against future Russian aggression?
In such a way, yes. But my own opinion, that we must be be separated. We must be like Ukraine, for Ukraine, Russia must be separated. NATO is good; it must be closed. But I think Ukraine has their own way to make Ukrainian way.
Mm. And that perhaps, some of the lessons of working with Western partners this year, they do supply a lot. They have been supportive, but things come with delays and not everything that's asked for. So would you have the view that it's good to partner with European countries, but not be reliant or dependent on them? Is that your feeling there? Ukraine needs to be self-sufficient in things like sort of missiles, drone production, its military complex, like Israel needs to be able to, if it has to, defend itself and produce its own armaments.
Of course, we must be. We must do in Ukrainian way, like in our way. Of course, we are glad and we thank you for the help of the Western countries, but we also can make it by own. We need some time to build all the structure, but yes, we want to make it by in Ukrainian way. We are glad that they give us some materials for war, but we want to make it in our Ukrainian way because Western politics or Western countries maybe they want to give us something, but they can't because they have their own responsibilities. They have their own army. We understand that they can't give us all what we ask them because they have their own governments, politics, army. We understand this situation. No, that's why it is.
And of course, part of the resilience and what you're fighting for is also the Ukrainian language. Now, I know that Russian is still very prevalent in parts of the country, in the south, in the east, and there are a lot of Russian speakers amongst the refugees. But when I was in Ukraine, and from many of the Ukrainians I've speaking to, and many have come from the east, so Russian was their first language. Many have over the last couple of years been, improving their Ukrainian or perfecting the Ukrainian, and many have now made the switch to speaking in Ukrainian and dropping Russian out of their lives. Do you think future security of Ukraine, not just its identity, but its future security, also rests on this transition to the Ukrainian language in, government and various other institutions?
Yes, I agree. Our Ukrainian society understands that one of the biggest problem of Ukraine now, after the war, of course, it's Russian language. A lot of people in Ukraine speak in Russian language, but they understand that this is a language of our not friends, that's why they change their language. In Ukraine we understand in Russian and Ukrainian. We can speak both, but in school, university, all the state government departments working on just on Ukrainian language. It's impossible to work on Russian, for example, to be in some department of the Ministry of Defense. It's impossible, and we need time to change it because Russian language is a big problem for Ukraine. Of course, we will change it slowly. We will change it.
That makes sense. And I think Dean's going to jump in a second. I was going to ask you about your experiences, because you've had two different sort of tours of duty in the current full-scale war, and as you say, in 2014 to 16. What are the major differences and experiences you've had of fighting Russians in both of these instances?
The big difference in the first variant of the war, Russian don't use in full their all militaries. They don't use them like in 100%. In this way, in this new scale, they use them the 100%. They don't using, for example, this separatist. They just using Russian army or the private some companies, private military companies. And now Ukrainian army was prepared for this war. We have a lot of casualties, we have a lot of loss of techniques, a lot of losing territories, but it's big war. It's impossible to don't lose anything in such a big war. it's a big difference to war in first, to make war in first time and in second. Big difference, and also we want to finish this question because no, Russia don't allow us to do this in this way. We will finish in this war.
And do you see any evidence that Russian officers are learning from their mistakes, or are they still repeating the same mistakes they made, earlier in the war that led to such losses of territory and, Russian troops? We saw these so-called sort of human meat wave attacks that Wagner were doing in Bakhmut, really crude tactics. But is it dangerous to underestimate the enemy, and are they learning from their mistakes?
Yes, of course, they're learning slowly, but they're learning, of course, because they're also military. They're learning and they change their techniques. It was changed, for example, from this winter. It changed in different directions. In winter, for example, in Bakhmut, they're using a lot of infantry, like you say, like you meet, like very very unwise. But they change. They change now. They work in little groups. They're using too much artillery. They use too much tanks. Too much FPV drones. Like they make this war like we in our way. We make it more modern. Use new techniques. Use drones, FPV to make it more less casualties.
Dean, I don't really want to jump in there with any more questions.
I was just laughing because statistically, it's more dangerous to drive a truck in the United States than to be deployed to Afghanistan, and that sums up what type of war that was. No offense to anybody. Yeah. Well, a couple of things, like in the interview, Bogdan said mines. They need more mines. What he really means is projectiles and shells and bullets and 155 millimeter, 120 millimeter mortar mines, right, Bogdan? Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And like how much, so when the title separate is attached to a military unit in Ukraine, it means that you are responsible for getting your own funding. Is that correct? Or
No, in Ukraine, the Ministry of Defense buying something. For example, our brigade can buy just for their own money some equipment. They can't buy for the government money what we want. For example, in Ukraine, it's not working like this. Just Ministry of Defense buying all equipment for the military for the government money.
so you've got to raise money to buy your own equipment, more or less.
Yes, we have some funding. We have some people which are donate something. No, in Ukraine it's normal because we have tradition from the Maidan, from the 2014, when the army wasn't prepared for this war. Army was almost dead. They don't have a normal uniform. It's begin tradition to donate something. If you don't want to go to war, if you don't want to kill someone, or just want to help, you need to donate, and we will buy equipment, some weapons.
All of my friends say, well, what about these Ukrainian Nazis? And I talk to them about Bogdan, and they just label him a Nazi. And it occurs to me, like there's the old joke, Putin's a bartender in the middle of a town in the middle of the desert. And then this Ukrainian Nazi walks in from the desert and he's famished and goes up to Putin, the bartender, and says, can I have a beer? Right? That's what you'd expect him to do. But instead, what he says is quack. And then Putin walks around and, what's going on? Why can't you speak properly? And then the quote unquote Ukrainian Nazi says quack. And then me sitting at the end of the bar, see, he's quacking because he's not a Ukrainian Nazi. He's a little black duck. People are just labeling. They're just buying into the Russian narrative, and this is causing a lot of contention in the United States. between, you know, Republicans and Democrats and all the rest. And just from what we just saw from Bogdan's replies, he's anything but a Nazi. A Nazi occurs for me as something that's evil, and Putin occurs for me as evil. Evil being something that damages humanity. And if you have a person who's fighting for their freedom, fighting for their country, that's the antithesis of a Nazi. That's exactly not a Nazi. So I just would like to get that out on, you know, the elephant in the room out on the table and just debunk this whole thing.
Yes, of course, the Western countries, some Western politics, or maybe some even governments say that we are Nazis. We are not Nazis. We are just Ukrainian patriots, maybe something more. But why we can't be patriots? Every country has their own patriots. Patriots are fighting in their armies for their society, civilian families, religion, for their homes, for example. Of course, no. If some people from United States think that we are Nazis, come to Lviv, come to Dnipro, come to Kyiv, come to Ternopil, come to Kryvyi Rih, Odessa, and you won't see the people are marching with swastika, Third Reich uniform, some, I don't know, no, something like this. You won't see this. You will see the Ukraine, very beautiful country, country in the stage of war. We will see a lot of militaries, a lot of people are without hands, legs. No, we have a lot of casualties, you know, and you will understand that we are not Nazis.
And not only that, you're also fighting alongside people who you may not necessarily agree with. You're fighting alongside, you know, Jews, Arabs, all sorts of people from around the world coming together to sort of fight together. How important is it for you that people can actually come together, you know, despite their disagreements? And how important was it actually during Maidan that people came together despite having very difficult, you know, very different sort of political backgrounds, but they recognized that what united them was you know, a potentially very repressive regime that was prepared to use extreme violence?
For example, in my brigade, in my battalion, we don't have, for example, Arabs. We have Jews, we have Russians, we have people from the Finland, Austria, Australia, United States, United Kingdom, Estonia, Czech Republic. It's normal for us. Because if people want to join us, people want to fight against Russia, they see all the evil and they want to join us and to fight. Maidan, of course, there was also people from, for example, Russia, Belarus, people from Israel, like just people. They want to join. They see the unfair situation in Ukraine with politics, with police, with Yanukovych. They want to help us. They want to see how we will finish this problem, how we will fix it. And they see that it's working. Maybe not in some legal way, maybe not some beautiful way, but it's working in Ukrainian way, old school Ukrainian way. No, it's like very ancient Ukrainian way.
And that's an interesting point for me, because this is something I think which is quite uncomfortable to many in the West, and difficult to understand. I'd like to get your point of view on this. Extreme violence was used by the regime in Kiev. They had the Berkut sort of special security forces, who we believe were also, you know, trained by Russian agents, GRU or FSB or whatever it was, and probably had advisors from Russia among their ranks as well, pushing them to use extreme violence. Now, if the protests in Maidan had not been prepared to push back against that violence and use some degree of force, you know, I suspect they may not have won. And I think that's a very difficult point for people to accept. You know, people talk about, you know, you follow the law, you don't use violence, peaceful protests, etc. But at some point, an enemy that is going to use extreme violence against you, and you're not prepared to stand up, as it were, against that, you run the risk of defeat. So what's your interpretation of Maidan? Was it just civil society? Was it huge numbers of people that won the day? Or was it that you were also prepared to meet violence with a certain degree of violence to succeed?
Yes, it's big question. I was in Maidan, and I've seen all the situation, how it goes to the heart, a very cruel way. There was peaceful protest. Then the regime using the police officers. We need to understand that we don't like to use force against the police when it's when it's all in legal way. When it's not legal way, we can use force because it's very proudly and very freedomly country. In Maidan, the police officers maybe not so trained by Russia, but there was also people from the Russian police forces in Ukrainian uniform, with Ukrainian weapons, with Ukrainian some documents, in Ukrainian structure. There was sent from Russia because they understand the police officers are also Ukrainian. They oftentimes they don't want to, for example, to shoot or to kick just civilian or just some woman. They was going after from their work. They was separate from their squads. They want to go out and don't see all this hate, all this fight. They just want to go home. Yes, society is turning in the good way because society wasn't prepared for this. They don't understand what's going on with this regime because everything's it's normal, everything's working, but the students can't make some protest. Why? It's legal. You can't. It's nothing so bad. Then we need to come and to change the situation. Of course, in Maidan there was a lot of people from the old, like in war, like in the army. You have people from the different societies. We have different from the different cities, regions, from the different countries. Everybody want to join this big freedom move to change situation, and we change it. Maybe not some legal way, maybe not some good way. Maybe it finished not so good for Ukraine because war just began, and the politics wasn't also preparing for this new politics, which become politics from after the Yanukovych has escaped from the country.
And you've mentioned that you're fighting alongside some Russians, and of course there have been insurgent units that have been injected into Russia to try and destabilize it. These people obviously are doing something brave. They're fighting against their own country, against their own citizens, as it were, for Ukrainian freedom. Do you think after the war, these people will go back to Russia to try and change it, or are they much more likely to remain in Ukraine and create their lives there instead, the country they've ended up fighting for?
If we will win this war and Russia will be defeated in 100%, of course they want to return to Russia because Russia is their native country. They want to change it in a political way, in society, in financial, like we in our way. We change it and we like it. They want to change it, and a lot of Russians which come to Ukraine, they come to Ukraine because the regime is want to kick them in jail, for example, to kill them. They come to fight against Russians, against Russian regime, maybe not against Russian people, but against Russian regime. But we fight against Russian regime and against Russians. We don't see any difference between them because, for example, if you don't want to go to war, you don't want to go to war. You don't need sign any papers. You don't need to take weapons. You don't need to go to trenches. We have people in Ukraine which don't want to fight. We don't say that you must fight. If you want to fight, go to fight and kill Russians. But no, it's just simple. For me, it's just simple.
Russian propaganda has also got a real thing about Azov, The siege of Azovstal was a key focus early on in the war, but also they continuously label anyone to do with Azov regiments as being fanatical, and as Dean said, as being Nazi. Everything I hear, however, is that there's a range of people there, and actually the Azov regiments have gone through a number of changes over the years. They've been formed and reformed and trained, and people from different units come in. So what's your view of the sort of history of Azov and the regiments in that region, both as military specialists, but also as a sort of real subject of Russian propagandists?
No, Azov. It's people with good education, people with like good patriots. People are know what to do in war. They're like professional militaries. It's in 2014. It was normal to be in a radical way, to be in patriotical some organization or movement, or even some battalions, companies. It's normal for Ukraine. We have a lot of patriotic movement, patriotic organization, patriotic battalion. It's normal because we have one idea: to defeat Russia, kill Russians. We have one job to do, and it's good. Azov good, 3rd Brigade good, some Maidan good. Everything is good that kill Russians in our way. No, Jew kill Russians in our brigade, for example. No, nothing bad for us.
And the 3rd Brigade is a particularly experienced battalion, isn't it? So you have a lot of people who you were fighting with who have extensive experience. Is that unusual when you compare it to other battalions who've been formed, during the full-scale war?
No, of course, 3rd Brigade was formed in first days of this big scale war, in new wave of war, and it's have a lot of experience now, because war is getting much harder, much bigger. We have a lot of loss, and yes, now it's experience. It's very big brigade, very professional brigade with normal equipment, every kind of equipment, West, Soviet, Russian. We have a lot of, for example, Russian techniques which Russian don't want to take with them. For example, in Kiev company, it's not good for them, but good for us.
And NATO training. When we were preparing for the interview, you expressed some, I think it was doubts about the usefulness of NATO training for everybody. So what's your view? I mean, would you benefit, for instance, from any NATO training, or do you think your direct experience of war is more relevant to what's happening now?
Of course, for example, if we take United States, they have experience of different wars, of different companies, but they don't have experience of this war. It's too different, that's why, in my opinion, to better to train Ukrainian soldier in Ukraine. It will be good also for all the Western countries, because they will have they must come, or if they won't come, to take some experience from the Ukrainian soldier. It's good because Russia is in Syria, in Africa, in a lot of countries, because it's Russia, it's Imperium. Yes, in my opinion, we need to train Ukrainian soldiers in Ukraine, because Western training, Western instructors, they don't have such experience in this war. It's too different war. It's not Afghanistan. It's not Iraq, because I know a lot of people from Ukrainian Army which was in Iraq, in Afghanistan. It's too different, It's too different. You can compare it. No, in my opinion, it's Western countries make good move, but they don't understand how to prepare Ukrainian soldiers for this big war. It's a big problem.
And talking of sort of mines, obviously mine clearance and various other equipment and techniques are going to be incredibly important once those territories are liberated. When it comes to equipment, we've mentioned planes, whether that's F-16s, which were announced today, actually, that they will eventually be coming. There are also other things like long-range missile capability. Storm Shadow is now in use. There's a French version of that as well. But ATACMS is something that's also been required. How important do you think is it for, say, laying siege to Crimea and disrupting Russian logistics to have more long-range missile capability?
Every military understands that to make war faster, to make it more bad for the enemy, you need to destroy the back and of their enemy army. You need to destroy their infrastructure, roads, all the equipment, even the barracks. You need to destroy everything what you can reach to make your forces to survive. No, it's normal for us. It's normal in every war, every Western country, for example. We need to destroy their 6 to be succeed in our 12.
That makes perfect sense. Dean, I don't know if you had any other questions there. I'm certainly, I think, reached the end of the list that I put together there, and I think that gives us a really good sense of what's going on. It gives us a good sense of what more the West needs to be doing. I guess my last question is something that's come up in the last week, and it's a really worrying conversation, and that is some Western political analysts and indeed people within NATO, and I suspect various governments like Washington as well, are starting to talk about land for peace and some kind of negotiation with Russia to give away chunks of Ukraine. Now, I think we'll all probably agree that that is a terrible idea, that no treaty that is signed with Russia is worth the paper it's written on. But are Ukrainians going to give any attention at all to people trying to persuade them to give up land for apparent peace deal?
For Ukrainian army, for Ukrainian people, society, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable to give some territories to our enemies, and that's all. For example, why United States won't give their territories for our peace? Give Texas to Russia, and it will be peace. Why not?
Alaska, maybe that's a good piece for land.
No,
deal.
It's like
Yeah.
just example. Okay, Alaska, good, snow, very good. Russia likes snow. Give them Alaska. They will agree? No, they won't agree, because it's their territory, it's their state, their government, their nation, their rules. No, it's their territory. No, it's unlawful to take their territory. The same in Ukraine. No, why some people from the other countries decide what we need to do? No, because it's in its talk about Nazis. Just Nazis decide what they need to do, what the other nations or other countries must to do to stop something or do something. Some Western countries or government explain some peaceful plans. It's very for Ukrainians. It's like we even can't hear about this. It's very unwise, very stupid, and we just laugh.
Actually, I don't think that's a bad idea, what you just said, give up Alaska. Not Alaska, because we all love Alaska. I think New Jersey, we could sell New Jersey to Russia and solve a lot of problems.
For $1.
Yeah. Right. And it's so small that one tank of gas and an M1A1 tank, we can take it back. It's not a problem. But what you're speaking to, though, Jonathan, is okay. So my background's predictive analytics, right? Predicting bad things that would happen to the United States, and I was very good at it. So to do that, you create a model, and that works for everybody. And that model is the punitive justice system. Oh, that's a baseline, and that creates different products. And the things that we're seeing, like why would the United States drag its feet on yada yada? Why would a particular gentleman in NATO say something inexplicably stupid, right? There's no other way to describe it. And of course, he doesn't have skills. So two of the products that a punitive justice system creates, and we all live under a punitive justice system. NATO's a punitive justice system. Russia, Ukraine, United States, Japan, you name any country, it's some sort of punitive justice system, and they all create products. And two of these products are skill sets: manager skills, where you do things right, and leader skills, where you do the right thing. And so for a NATO guy to say something that's stupid, he's not actually being stupid. He might be quite intelligent, but he doesn't have the skill set called leader skills, do the right thing skills. He has a weighting in manager skills, doing things right skills. And when you get a discrepancy between the two, like they're both equally important, or they seem to be, but when you get a discrepancy between the two, then you get assumptions being formed. And Dietrich Dorner wrote a book called The Logic of Failure. Assumptions are the root cause of all human failure. This war would not happen if Putin hadn't made assumptions. And the reason why Russians are so easy to kill is because they make assumptions, right? And that's just a product of their system. I think Putin's evil. That's my personal opinion, evil being something that damages humanity. And it's really important for Ukraine to win this fight, because it is about freedom. And it occurs to me that we need freedom in the world in order to be able to tackle big, big problems. Freedom is like a playground for ideas to solve big problems. And I haven't heard anyone speaking about this. This is not just Ukraine's fight. This is a fight for humanity. Because if you let somebody like Russia and Putin win, then that decreases freedom, and that decreases our ability to solve big problems, whether
And
you're
innovation too. I mean, it limits
Exactly.
the power of innovation. To pick up on one thing, so if this NATO guy is exercising his managerial skill, which he sees as sensible within his world, and it's not a leadership skill, that means that idea wasn't his idea. It means that he has accidentally said the quiet bit out loud. He has expressed an idea that he didn't originate, but he will have heard, and he will have heard other influential people behind the scenes using. That's the thing that kind of worries me, that this is not just an aberration, that this is an idea that is doing the rounds in Washington, maybe even sort of Brussels and NATO, and maybe even getting some traction. It's also an idea which is a direct provocation to Vladimir Putin, because where he sees weakness, where he sees the willingness to negotiate, he will double down on aggression. Now, I'd love to hear Bogdan's point of view on that, because you've been fighting the Russian mindset now for many, many years. So how does Putin interpret this kind of weakness on the Western side?
For example, Western country or government, even some politics in NATO, they want just peace. What kind of peace? What kind of peace they want? They want that everything will be okay? No, it's impossible, because we live in Earth. It's impossible. We always make some wars, make some fight. It's impossible to make peace all around the world. It's impossible. No, it's like for me, it's impossible. For example, Russia using them because some politics in Europe, they want just to give everything what they want, to stop war, to make it peace. Everything will be good. Financial is going. Oil is going to Europe. Gas, oil, everything is good. German people don't make protests against the don't have some gas or some benzene. I don't know. For example, I think just people don't understand what to fight for their countries, for their families, for their religion, for their language, for their earth, for their trees. They don't understand, because the last war, for example, for Europe, it was too long. It was too long ago. For example, Baltic people, they understand. If you talk with them, they understand what is going on. War is nearby, because they have big neighbors as we have. They understand, but they have a big problem, because they have two small countries. We have big countries. We have big big ideas, big militaries, a lot of people, big country. No, for us it's normal. But for example, Litva or Latvia, they're too small. That's why they are helping us in 100%. They give us all their weapons, like example, all helicopters or BMP. They want that we make this war in our way, that we won this war. But for the people from Belgium or Germany or France, Spain, everything is good. They don't have any problems. They think they don't have any problems, but they have a lot of problems.
Yes, yet.
No, it will be gone. Nothing will change. That's why we need to defeat all big terrorists, like in I don't know, like Gaddafi, for example. No, it's maybe not so good example, but Putin is very bad. He very bad person. He don't want to build Russia. He don't want to build roads, hospitals. I don't know, cities, business. He just want to make some territories in Syria, in Afghanistan, in Ukraine. They, for example, take some territories. They even don't build there anything.
That's right. And before we started, we were talking about, villages and the impression of being in Ukraine, where Ukrainians value the land they've got. They tend it, they look after it, they plant flowers, vegetables, etc. You can see that the land that they possess is being used and cherished. Whereas, my direct experience of Russia is that a lot of the land they own, a lot of the land they covet of their neighbors, they'll take it, but they won't know what to do with it. In fact, they'll trash it, destroy it, pollute it. Anyone who's traveled through the Russian countryside will know that it's not good and it's not treated productively or kindly. I think we'll probably have to end there. I'm sure Dean's got a million more questions, as have I, but I think we're out of time there. And I wanted to say thank you, Bogdan, for speaking to us. Also, thank you for everything you and your colleagues are doing to fight for freedom in Europe. I mean, some of us understand what you're doing and are immensely grateful.
Also, thank you for this interview.
Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.